When the NFL Network did its America's Game series, they had a special feature called the Missing Rings. Teams that were so good that came so far, but fell just short of winning the Super Bowl. They featured teams like the 81 Chargers, the 69 and 98 Minnesota Vikings, and the 1990 Bills. But what if I told you there was one franchise, despite several moves to different cities, that's still haunted by one championship game loss? As the oldest existing pro football franchise dating back to when Willie McKinley was president, first known as the Morgan Athletic Club, eventually becoming the Chicago Cardinals. In 1921, the Decatur Staleys moved to Chicago, calling themselves the Chicago Staleys, and in 1922 were renamed the team we now know today as the Chicago Bears. Although the Bears had quite a bit of success from 1920 to the end of World War II, winning 7 championships including their first year moving to Chicago as the Staleys. However, their South Side counterparts had nowhere near the amount of success. The Cardinals' only championship was exactly 100 years ago in 1925, despite finishing second in the standings and even losing 21-7 to the first-place Pottsville Maroons. But in a blizzard of controversy, the Pottsville Maroons were suspended by the NFL for playing an unauthorized exhibition game and led to the second-place Cardinals being crowned NFL champions in 1925. The most controversial championship win in NFL history. But the low point for the Cardinals was during World War II, when all the good players were drafted by Uncle Sam. With a merger with the Steelers sandwiched in between, the Cardinals franchise would go practically 3 years without winning a single game. However, in 1946 it showed some promise, with the returning coach Jimmy Causelman, with offensive standouts Elmer Angstman, Billy Dewell, and Mal Kuttner. The 46 Cardinals would post its first winning season in 11 years. Then in 1947, Cardinals owner Charles Bidwell would break open the Brinks truck, signing the aforementioned Elmer Angston, quarterback Paul Crispin, Pat Harder, and the legendary quintuple threat known as Charlie Trippi. Even though Charles Bidwell referred to the backfield as the dream backfield, most of us know it as the $1 million backfield. Sadly, Charles Bidwell would not see his team bear fruit, as shortly after he signed Trippi, he would die of pneumonia in April of 1947. But the Cardinals made sure that Bidwell's dream backfield was a dream come true, upsetting the defending world champion and their Northside counterpart Chicago Bears to advance to its first ever NFL championship game, and behind 2 long Elmer Angston touchdowns and 2 long Charlie Trippi touchdowns, the Cardinals would beat the Philadelphia Eagles 28-21 for its first ever undisputed NFL title. The 48 Cardinals had high ambitions of repeating as NFL champions, and it started off well with a tightly contested rematch with the Eagles, as Mal Kuttner's only 2 catches resulted in touchdowns, one by Paul Crispin in the second quarter and one by Charlie Trippi in the fourth that put the Cardinals ahead for good. Despite Mal Kuttner's and backup QB Ray Marlowe's stellar outing, a kickoff return touchdown for the Bears was what doomed the Cardinals against their inner-city rival. They would meet again later with higher stakes. Against Curly Lambeau's Packers, the Cardinals' $1 million backfield produced more than just on the ground. An Elmer Angston touchdown on the first, a Charlie Trippi punt return on the second, and a Pat Harder field goal that put the game out of reach and the Cardinals at 2-1. At the Polo Grounds against the Giants, it was one of the most historic games in franchise history for the Cardinals, with 7 different players scoring touchdowns, including Mal Kuttner scoring 3, with nearly 600 yards of total offense and 63 points, good for second most all-time behind just 65 that was produced a year later. At home against the Boston Yanks, yes, there was a team called the Boston Yanks, the Cardinals turned on the burners in the second quarter, behind not one but 2 Bill Blackburn pick sixes, and Trippi, Angstman, and even Kuttner getting touchdowns on the ground, produced 49 straight points and a third straight win. On Halloween at the Coliseum against the Rams, Pat Harder and Billy Dewell was the Rams boogeyman on that night, with Dewell going 8 for 144 on receiving, and Pat Harder scoring 15 points via kicks and the 1-yard touchdown that put him up 27-3. Against the lowly Lions, the Cardinals put on an offensive show once again. Elmer Angstman and Charlie Trippi each producing 2 rushing and 1 receiving touchdown. Paul Christman returning from injury, throwing for 3 scores, including a long bomb to Mal Cudner, added to his already impressive 1948 season. Against the Steelers, the Cardinals took advantage of 5 takeaways, with Mal Cudner producing 6 catches for 126 and another touchdown. Plus, Charlie Trippi scoring his 3rd punt return touchdown of the season, and a Pat Harder touchdown that put the game out of reach, and the Cardinals at 7-1. In a rematch against the Rams, the Cardinals needed every last point. They needed all of Mal Cudner's touchdown from Ray Maloff, all of Charlie Trippi's touchdown in the second quarter, and all of Pat Harder's kicks and 4th quarter touchdown to avoid the upset against the Rams. But Thanksgiving against Detroit was a much smoother affair, led by rookie Jerry Davis's punt return to start the scoring, and Matt Cudner only catching 2 passes, but both for touchdowns, good enough for a 28-14 win. In the rematch with the Packers, the Cardinals put on yet another offensive clinic, scoring over 40 points for the 4th time this season, with Mal Cudner catching touchdown passes from both Paul Christman and Ray Maloff, and the Cardinals' ground game beating up the Packers for nearly 300 yards and 4 touchdowns from 4 different guys. Despite the 10-1 mark, the Cardinals would have to beat the Chicago Bears in the regular season finale in order to go to the NFL Championship, just like the year before. And despite trailing for most of the game, the $1 million backfield produced at the most clutch time. With Harder, Trippi, and Yanksman getting the game winner at the end, the Southside Cardinals beat the Northside Bears, and the Cardinals were off to rematch with Philly for the NFL Championship. Back then, the NFL Championship game's location was not determined by win-loss record. It was switched back and forth between whoever the Eastern and Western Conference champions were. The previous outing between the Eagles and Cardinals was played at Comiskey Park. This year, it was played in Philadelphia, and that's where Mother Nature stepped in. In what is considered one of the craziest weather games in NFL history, heavy snowfall delayed the game by half an hour. Plus, this was the first televised NFL championship game in NFL history, with ABC carrying it. It snowed to the point where fans were required to bring shovels, and if they did bring shovels to clear the field, they were allowed to watch the game for free. There were extra officials for sideline calls due to how bad the snow was. And players from both teams were asked to help the groundsman crew to get the tarp out of the field just so they can play. If this were to happen today, then most likely the game would have been postponed, just like the Pittsburgh-Buffalo wildcard game a couple years ago. But the game ensued, and as you can imagine, the passing game was basically non-existent. Between the two teams, there was 5 completions out of 23 attempts for a total of 42 yards and 3 interceptions. And the $1 million backfield could not produce in the snow, with Paul Christman out to injury, and Trippi, Harder, and Yanksman combining for just 30 carries and just 89 yards. Early in the 4th quarter, when the Cardinals fumbled deep in their own territory, Philly was in prime position for future Hall of Famer Steve Van Buren, who almost missed the game because he didn't think the game was going to be played and his car got stuck in the snow. But after getting buses and trains to the stadium, Van Buren ran for almost 100 yards and scored the game's only touchdown, a 7-0 victory for the Philadelphia Eagles and their first ever NFL championship. Oh, what might have been for the Cardinals had the game been postponed to another day. The Cardinals franchise suffered from the loss. They would not play in another playoff game for 26 years and not play for another championship in 60 years.